Hey guys, it's QuickyBaby, and this is going to be one of my most requested quick tank reviews on the T57 Heavy, one of the most devastating tier 10 heavy tanks in the game. T57 Heavy has the highest DPM of any of the tier 10 heavy tanks. It has a 4-round autoloader capable of doing 1,600 average damage to your opponent within 6 seconds of firing the first shell. In the right situation, it's got to be one of the most powerful tanks in the game, and hopefully I'm going to show you why in this tank review. And don't worry, if you have no interest in this overpowered tier 10 American autoloader, I'll hopefully give you some tips about how you can take them out effectively on the battlefield. So the T57 Heavy is at the end of one of, in my opinion, the most interesting tank trees in the entire game. You will have gone through a T21, a very powerful light tank, the T71, a tank that is competitive in the 742 esports game mode of the game, the T69, and the true predecessor to the T57 Heavy, the T54E1. Now the tank has got 2,250 hit points, which is just that 10% higher than most of the medium tanks in the game, meaning that if you do get into a fight with a tier 10 medium tank, the T57 Heavy usually comes off for the better. The tank weighs just shy of 55 tons and it has an 810 horsepower engine. Now the top speed on this tank is a bit underwhelming really, it's 35.4. making it one of the slower tier 10 heavy tanks, but it does have pretty darn good traverse speed at 30 degrees a second. Now the hull armor on this tank isn't quite as good as that on the T10 the other tier 10 American heavy tank. It's 203 at the front, 50 at the side, 38 at the rear, while the turret armor is 127 at the front, 137 at the side, and 50 at the rear. Let's just take a quick look into what tank viewer to see if there are any weaknesses within this design. So here's our T57 heavy tank, and here's the armor profile with the key. The only place which has 203mm of armor is this beak, this mid-ridge, and you should avoid shooting here at all costs. The upper plate on this tank is 127mm, but it is very well angled indeed. So unless you're above the vehicle, it's going to be quite hard for you to penetrate it. The whole of the lower plate of this tank is 114.3mm thick, which means that most tanks in the game are able to penetrate it. Now if we hide the tracks and look down the side armor, the upper part has 50mm and the lower part is 44.5, with the back of the tank a very lowly 38.1, which you can very easily penetrate with high explosive ammo, so load it if you've got it. One thing that's interesting is that unlike the T10E5, that when the armor is angled at the side there is a gaping weak point here that is not present on the T57 Heavy. Here's the hull of the T10E5 and we can see that weak part of the armor down here right at the bottom left and bottom right of the tank, which is only 44mm thick. The T57 Heavy is a little bit more protected, which means that if you do angle the tank, that your tracks are quite a lot more likely to absorb the damage. Now let's have a look at the turret design. We can see this area here is 137 and it's very well angled down the side of the gun, while this whole area here is 127mm. Now shooting directly at the gun on this tank is kind of hit or miss. As we can see, depending on the angle that you're at, it can either be very well angled or not. This means that this beak can bounce for you, but equally, you don't have a very thick mantlet like you do on some of the other tanks, which means that people do auto-aim at you, or even to shoot directly at your gun, are quite likely to not only take your gun out, but also penetrate your tank at the same time. One thing I will highlight is that turret ring is clearly visible all the way around the tank, so if you want to jam the turret of this, just put one in here, and you'll only have to go through 114mm of armor. Now while the side armor on this tank is 137mm thick, we can see it is very flat and very long indeed, which means that when you're shooting at a T57 Heavy from the side, this is a very viable position to shoot. But to be honest, the hull armor is so tall that you're going to be able to easily shoot it when you have the side or the rear of the vehicle. So really what we found out is the T57 Heavy has armor of medium thickness at the front, but its side and rear armor is poor. A lot like a T10E5. But this tank definitely doesn't have the turret armor that the T10E5 has. It's rather large and fat, and apart from pulling off miracle bounces, your key to taking out this tank from the front is to shoot it in the turret. Now let's move on to the strong part of this tank, and that is this fantastic 120mm gun. This is an autoloader which is capable of firing 4 shells with a 2-second delay between each of the shells. And the time of a complete reloading is 25 seconds, which results in a 7.74 rounds a minute rate of fire, which means that this tank has more DPM over a minute than any of the tier 10 medium tanks. And the tank is fairly accurate, 0.35, and has an aim time of 2.7, which means that it's not too bad on this vehicle. One of the great things is the tank is capable of using vertical stabilizers, and if you're so inclined, an enhanced gun laying drive, which massively reduced this 2.7 second aim time, and with 258mm of penetration, it's pretty much point and click with this ridiculous 120mm. The rest is fairly standard. 36 degrees a second traverse speed and 400 meters view range make this a very flexible tier 10 heavy tank that's able to quickly re-engage its targets and even spot its enemies at long ranges, pretty much like all of the tier 10 tanks can. Anyway, that's quite enough theory crafting. Let's take a look to see how this beast performs in some gameplay. So, I'm assaulting with Green Man and with Jingles on Sand River. It's quite nice to play an assault game in one of my tank reviews. And nice to play in a platoon with Jingles and Green Man as well. Jingles is in his T10E5, the other tier 10 American heavy tank, while Green Man is sporting the FE215B. The only other real competitor that the T57 Heavy has, really, with regards to DPM. The more that I think about it, the more that I think it's a bit silly that a tank that doesn't have an autoloader has a worse overall rate of fire than a tank that does. When you think about the Batchat, the Batchat has significantly worse overall DPM than, for example, the STB-1, the FB-4202, any of the Russian Soviet medium tanks. Much worse DPM, actually, when you look at the Batchat's reload stats. So it's bizarre that the T57 Heavy would have more DPM over a minute than two very competitive tier 10 heavy tanks, such as the E5 or the 215B, who were designed around the same 120mm. I'm sticking behind Green Man here, trying to push him along his way. Jingles has the first engage with some tier 8 heavy tanks. And this IS-3 is about to just find out how quickly we can rebalance tier 8 heavy tanks. 1, 2, 3, 4. That's how quickly 3 tier 10 heavy tanks can manage to take out 3 tier 8 heavy tanks. And we were able to do 1,057 damage there, and I'm trying to take fire for Jingles. Get in between Jingles and this KV-4. 1, 2, 3. If you're watching the T57 Heavy for the first time, you might be surprised at how quickly this tank reloads. Good shot there by the mouse. Managed to put one into our turret ring, the weakest part of the armor, as we highlighted in the garage. But we're not going to let that stop us. We can see there's an AMX 50B on my left, the tier 10 French heavy tank. And we're going to punish his turret. 1,697 damage there, done in probably less than 10 seconds. Absolutely ruthless, and that's what the T57 Heavy is in a nutshell. Now Green Man is locked down on his flank. I've told him, dig in bro, I'll go round and I'll flank them. My first plan is to try and take out what I can here, probably the T30. Yep, T30. 1, 2. Oh, I have to shoot him again because we low rolled. And we managed to put in our remaining shell in the T28 prototype. I thought that I might kill that T30 with that shell, but I didn't. And Green Man finishes off the T28 prototype. Now there's a Borsig there. because I've got an autoloader, you don't even really have to aim that much. I'm unable to really penetrate this mouse from this angle. Don't want to reload though, so I think I aim at his weak point here, the lower plate. 1, 2, and now we reload. And Green Man is shredding up this mouse. It's only a matter of time for this mouse. Need his lower plate. And Green Man just shoots him at the end at the same time, meaning that we end on 5 kills. And I kind of mistimed my shot, so I couldn't steal that top gun. Nevertheless, this was still a great game. You got to see an absolute blitzkrieg here. 6,500 damage, 5 kills in less than 5 minutes. We got a couple of bounces, as we can see, off the upper plate, but all the ones that hit our lower plate and our turret ring managed to penetrate us. We don't need to really look at the post-game stats. This clearly demonstrated how strong the T57 Heavy is, capable of bursting out up to and above 1,600 damage with its 4-round 120mm autoloader, with an insanely fast reload time, to mean that after quickly hiding yourself, you can come back for some more. You also got to see just how well this tank can work in platoons. When you know that you've got some friends to back you up, spread the damage, and also to finish off tanks, for example, if you were to low roll, you can have a devastating role for your team on the battlefield. So let's move along and take a look at some more gameplay. So no soft tier 8 tanks on the enemy this game. In fact, we're the only team that has a tier 8, GG Matchmaker. Oh, and also, the enemy team have got 2 extra tier 10 tanks. Alright, Matchmaker, you've thrown us a challenge. Let's see what we can do in the T57 Heavy. So while this position has been nerfed, with a new mount here blocking most of your fire, you can still have a fairly effective roll from here. So I'm going to get forwards into some bushes. My initial plan was to stop anyone who was to rush down here. This is a very important location. I wanted to stop any of their medium tanks from going and digging in here, to be able to spot everyone up here and having a pivotal role in the game. So this pace of combat is going to be a lot slower than the game you just saw in a platoon on Sand River. Here we can see a mouse. We bounce our first shot, hit our second, hit our third and set him on fire, and hit our fourth, and those fire ticks. I don't know if this guy is a mouse or a bot. Why does this feel like the sinking of the Titanic as he goes into the water? As we quickly reload and finish him off. So, there's 3,000 damage done in the first couple minutes of this game. Poor Mouse Tanic. But I can't complain. So from here on, you're going to see the T57 Heavy having a sneaky role. Now, would it be right to take this tank up on the hill? And this is something that's very important with the T57 Heavy that's quite hard to demonstrate in even a half an hour review that this is probably going to be. So we hit that E100 once. We get spotted. We have to pull back. Not the best result for a T57 Heavy. But we have some shots on the IS-8. Let's get that gun singing. We managed to miss the fourth. And a great shot there by the IS-8 to not only detrack us, but also cripple us. And I just got wrecked. I lost my ammo rack, and I felt like I had to repair my track rather than my ammo rack there. Meaning that I'm ammo racked and on 600 health. And I'm getting shot from all angles here. So you're seeing a couple of things. One, that the all-round armor on the T57 Heavy, it's not great. If you can't keep the fight very much contained to that frontal combat, and hopefully keep the pressure up on your opponent so he misses and hits your upper plate or another well-angled part of your turret, then you're going to struggle. And boy do I wish that I was using a large repair kit on this tank. Here's a T1025. We put one into him. Two. We don't need to put the third. Let's try and find another target. And we reload. And to be honest, now that I'm ammo racked, I feel that this tank is a lot more balanced. I mean, even though we're ammo racked, look how quickly we're reloading. Our reload time is about the same now as probably a Foch or a Waffenträger Alpha E100. The only problem is that we only do 1600 damage a clip. But we're still capable of being dangerous even while ammo racked. It's very unlikely we're going to be able to penetrate that E100 from here. So while this gameplay is going on, I just want to highlight a few things about trying to put your T57 Heavy in the optimal situation. What you want to do is you want to try and be able to engage opponents where you're able to fully unload your clip, hopefully for only getting shot at once. Now the gun doesn't do very well at shooting at turrets unless they're very lightly armored. What the gun does do well at is shooting at the hull armor of tanks and also the side and the rear of tanks. Now a lot of heavy vehicles at tier 10 would be expected to go up onto the hill. Now while that's a very important, pivotal position on this map, I don't feel like the T57 Heavy is a true heavy tank that's capable of doing that. Put one in, and finish him off. I'm looking for a couple more shots before we have to reload. But we reload anyway. So what I'm trying to highlight is that the gun on the T57 Heavy doesn't really want to shoot at the turrets of tanks. You can't go hull down. Your turret armor at its thickest point, I believe from the garage, is only 130 millimeters. Whereas the armor on the 215B on the turret, the IS-7 as an example, the 113, the E100, you can't compete with the turret armor of those tanks. Unless you can shoot them in the hull, or the rear, or the side of their turret, then you're not going to be able to penetrate them. And it doesn't matter if you've got all the DPM in the world, it doesn't matter if you're able to do 1600 damage within 6 seconds of your first shot, you will lose the engagement. I really want to shoot here, but because I'm ammo racked, I'm being a lot more careful with my shots. Putting a good one there. And I think that 215B just got rebalanced. Even though we bounced one on the IS-7, we're able to put 3 more shots in against the 215B, doing 1,100 damage to that tank. Now, this is a fairly interesting battle. The enemy have taken up a very strong position to the northeast of the map. And there's a big fight going on to the south. We can see a Lorraine charging after one of our medium tanks. Has to be the T62A. But the T62A manages to deal with that Lorraine. Now, when this battle was happening, I was hoping that our team were going to be able to clean up the south. And I was just trying to hold the north with our tank destroyers. Putting a good kill there in the IS-7. And I'm just taking shots of opportunity at the C100 to see if I could get lucky, but we didn't. Looking back on this replay, I probably shouldn't have fired that last shot because it meant that I needed to reload a clip of heat to still be able to have the maximum 4 shells in my clip. Nevertheless, heat ammunition is much better suited for dealing with the turret of an E100 than your AP ammunition. You guys might be surprised as to how fast this tank reloads even when ammo racked. It's just simply how crazy this vehicle is. So I'm looking for opportunities to be able to get the 113 and the E100. I decide to go the long way round so I can sneak up into the bushes to hopefully be able to engage the E100 with our freshly loaded heat clip. Doesn't look like these guys want to leave the hill though. So I decide, and this is probably a pretty silly move in retrospect, to close the distance. But I believed that if the enemies wanted to come and poke up on the ridgeline, they would be getting shot by all of my tank destroyers behind me. And equally that they really need to attack to be able to interrupt the cap. Now there's a 113 up there, that's a tier 10 Chinese heavy tank. Just had a lot of its health shaved off. It only has 50 more hit points than the T57 Heavy. That still means that I can't kill him in an entire clip. Yet. Now I can. Now he's got 1,575 hit points. That means that, oh, he's even got less now. Well, he's a definite kill if I'm able to penetrate all of my shots. And when you're going into combat, that's one of the most important things that you can do in the T57 Heavy. You need to know how many shots you have to penetrate to be able to take out the target. And now you're going to see T57 Heavy gameplay at its lamest, I guess. This is autoloader 101. I don't want to go around this corner. I don't want to get shot by the 113 or the E100. However, if my ally gets shot, what's stopping me now? 1, 2, 3, all into the lower plate weakness of the 113. So that Object 140 takes the hit for me. And I get the damage. Am I happy about that? Looking back on it, it feels a little brutal, if I'm very honest with you, gentlemen. Very brutal indeed. But being a support tank, such as that, is something that you're going to have to do if you want to be very successful in your autoloaders. Here we can see the enemy capping, well, our team capping out, and I decide that it's not worth going up and dying and getting shot by the E100. So looking back on it, I guess the T57 Heavy is a bit like a Waffenträger auf E100. I'm talking about that last fight that we had there. You basically wait until one of your allies makes a move, takes a hit for really what should be for you, and then you get, on average, 1,600 damage with your clip, and there's nothing that the enemy can do about it. And that is really how balanced the T57 Heavy is. And that's not to say that this tank doesn't have its weak points. If you can catch it while it's reloading, then that's a great opportunity for you. And also, if it's engaged by multiple opponents and caught out in the open, like we saw there, then you're going to lose all of your health and your modules very quickly. The worst thing that you can do against a T57 Heavy is allow it to dictate the pace of the combat, and also to allow it to take down one target after one target after one target. You really want to put the pressure on this tank, and you don't want to let it play its game, which is pop out, catch a tank out in the open, kill it, and reload within 20 or so seconds. So let's just take a quick look at the post-game stats. So this replay netted us 104,000 credits, as well as a tank sniper and a high caliber medal. It's quite likely as well that if our team didn't cap out, that we might have been able to pick out a Top Gun medal with our 5 kills and 8,200 damage done. Albeit I will admit that there was a 3,000 damage gift of the mouse at the beginning of the game. Maybe this game showed you a little bit more about the armor profile of the T57 Heavy. We got shot 3 times, of which all 3 penetrated, reducing us to a fraction of our starting health and making our tank ammo-racked for the majority of the game. Nevertheless, 1,276 base experience was a mastery badge in this vehicle, and we did manage to pick up 50,000 credits profit, even though we fired the occasional heat round when we ran out of standard ammunition. Both of those replays happened last month in June, but I have countless other massive damage games that is highlighted as we average 3,652 damage every battle in this tier 10 tank, as well as on average 1,050 experience per battle. One thing as well that's interesting is that I do average killing over 2 enemies a game in the T57 Heavy. It is a ridiculously dominant tank that amplifies the playstyle that you will have learned when you've played the T69 and the T54E1. One thing I will say is that if you hated the T54E1 and the T69, then while there's a chance that you might still like the T57 Heavy, in my opinion, it's pretty much more of the same. One thing that I quickly want to do is do a tank comparison between the T57 Heavy and the AMX 50B, which is a very similar tier 10 French tank, and this might help you decide the question of should I get a T57 Heavy or an AMX 50B. The T57 Heavy has slightly more hit points, 150, but it is massively slower. Its top speed is 35 kilometers an hour, where the 50B can go at 65 kilometers an hour. And also, this is a massive thing as well, the French tank is able to go 8 kilometers an hour faster backwards. That gives the 50B huge amounts more flexibility with regards to retreating, or simply going forwards, firing off its 4 shells, and as quickly as possible pulling back. However, that's where the advantages end for the 50B. It has worse frontal hull armor, side armor, rear armor, massively worse turret armor both at the front and the side, and worse rear turret armor. Now, while the tank, as we mentioned earlier, is massively more mobile, both with regards to its traverse speed and also its horsepower to weight ratio, this is the key difference. The T57 Heavy gets 7.74 rounds a minute rate of fire, whereas the 50B only gets 6.4. Now, while we say only 6.4, that's still as much as the FV215B, and more DPM than the T10E5. Still, that rate of fire difference feels very significant when you compare the tanks directly. Now, here's one of the biggest differences between the tanks. The reload time, i.e. the time delay between the shots, is only 2 seconds with the T57 Heavy, whereas the 50B has 2.5 seconds. That means that after the initial shot, the T57 Heavy is going to fire its remaining shots within 6 seconds, whereas the 50B will take 7.5 seconds. And that extra 1.5 seconds can be all the difference between you pulling back or you taking that one shot from the 100 Jagdpanzer. Now, a common misconception is that the elevation arcs are different between the two tanks, but at least according to Tank Compare, they're exactly the same. There is one advantage that the 50B has, though, however, and that is that it carries a lot more ammunition. So that is the AMX 50B/T57 Heavy argument. The T57 Heavy has a much more capable gun, which fires faster more often with less aim time, but the AMX 50B is a more mobile, faster heavy tank, which is capable of retreating or just simply outpositioning its enemies more effectively. Now, if I personally had to recommend one, it would be get the T57 Heavy. And if you want to have a fast autoloader, pick yourself up the Batchat. Nevertheless, that is just my opinion, and I've had amazing games in the 50B that wouldn't be capable in the T57 Heavy, simply due to its amazing mobility. And there you have it, in my opinion, one of the best tier 10 tanks in the game, and something that everyone should eventually aim to get. I hope you guys have enjoyed this review. If you had, please consider rating it down below, it really helps me out. And let me know in the comments what you think about the T57 Heavy. Have I missed anything out? What do you think about the T57 Heavy AMX 50B discussion? Anyway, as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.